Games Workshop doesn't sell lore, they just sell plastic toys. Or some such variation of that argument is something that I've seen wandering around Twitter quite a bit since the release of the female Adeptus Custodes models, and I want to address this one directly because it is pretty much the sole singular argument I've seen from the progressive side on this, beyond, yeah, we just want to break your toys, or lore doesn't matter, as, well, those are the only other two arguments and they hardly qualify. Here it is presented in meme format, but you are under a misconception that we are a sci-fi franchise. We are not. What we are is a miniature company. Chances are not our most valuable customers, that will be the people buying our plastic crack. So the argument here is twofold. One, Games Workshop doesn't sell you lore, it doesn't sell you a universe, all of that is irrelevant and trivial, they only sell plastic toys. And two, chances are not the most valuable audience. Okay, let's have a look at this, shall we? Because whilst this has been categorically debunked on quite a few occasions previously, it's nice to go through it and hammer out the reasons yet again. Beginning with, what is this? A rock? No, that's a Land Raider, obviously, you blind moron. What is this? No, it's not a piece of limestone, it's a Space Marine. What is wrong with you? This harkens back to a funny example I saw years ago, which is this thing here, showing two US tankmen playing a game of Warhammer 40,000 during the Iraq War. They just grabbed whatever they had to hand, put it on a board, and started playing it, with no official models, and using, what was it here, the dipstick from a destroyed enemy tank as a measuring device. This illustrates quite perfectly how important your plastic models are. Utterly and completely irrelevant. In fact, I am old enough to remember the times when Games Workshop, in their official magazine White Dwarf, gave you tutorials on how to make a tank from an old discarded shampoo bottle, okay? The models are nice. They are a visual representative of what's going on board, but they are tertiary at best to Warhammer 40,000. So what is the primary then? The rules? Even all the way back when I can remember, the 40k community was one of the most harmonious and unified I'd ever seen. Even then, everyone agreed the rules bloody sucked. Every iteration, the rules have been declared as sucky. Like, they've made improvements here, one step forward, two step backwards, pretty much constantly throughout their entire game. Nobody's ever just really sat back and go, wow, Warhammer 40,000 is such an incredibly well-designed game. That's very rarely, if ever, indeed happened. No, people like it for the lore. That was always the primary argument. Look at 40k, it's grim, it's dark, it's so cool. Look at the Space Marines, the tanks, and the dreadnoughts, wow. And a lore, by the way, that remained pretty much consistent for absolute ages. So the Outer Circle made an excellent little reference chart here showing the Rogue Trader era, when, they were just tossing things at the wall, going like, okay, we're gonna make Warhammer Fantasy in space, and then eventually it began consolidating and had a long-ass period of just 40k. From 1993 to 2016, Warhammer 40,000 was a pretty much consistent, and some would even say stagnant entity. Indeed, that was the primary complaint about 40k back then, even as I myself stood by the sidelines and went, do you really want 40k to evolve? Do you really want Games Workshop to start writing new stuff? Do you think they're able to do that? And the answer, of course, was always no, but nevertheless, we got something new. This was the period that launched Warhammer 40,000 into the mainstream consciousness. This was what established 40,000 as a setting, as a franchise, and as a universe. And it is what brought people into it. To give even more blatant examples, the Horus Heresy was a huge success, way beyond anything that Games Workshop thought it would be, as I guarantee you, the original plan was for 20 bucks, tops, maybe as little as 10, maybe. They wanted to put this out as an exploratory series to say, like, okay, what can we do with this? Because they've also tried the Times of Legend series in Warhammer, although that received a rather cold response, and it became so popular, it got its own game. Again, showing quite directly how it's not the game that creates the fans, it's not the rule set, it's the universe. Because you could play with this rule set using anything whatsoever. It's utterly irrelevant. The rules in themselves serve no other purpose than to facilitate you playing games in a certain universe. If not, you could simply use the 40k rule set for other things, like World War II or Industrial Revolution or whatever the hell you wanted, but nobody does because they're here to play 40k, the universe. An even more strident example of this. Remember Warhammer Fantasy? Now, if it was true that it's just the rules or it's just the models, it's not the lore isn't important, then obviously killing off Warhammer Fantasy and replacing it with Age of Sigmar, well, not only should it have translated one-to-one directly, if anything, you should have seen a marked increase in player retention and players talking about it and loving Age of Sigmar. After all, Age of Sigmar is receiving way more support than Warhammer Fantasy did for the last, 5 to 10 years of its life cycle. This should be vastly more popular if we are to believe that the universe is irrelevant and it's just the models or just the rules. Especially as the models for Age of Sigmar is the one thing that everybody praises it for. The models are beautiful, and yet the opposite is true. To the point that Games Workshop reluctantly, as if being hauled over a bed of hot coals, finally decided to reintroduce Warhammer the Old World, which isn't even the old world, mind you. It's far too high fantasy and far too political to actually be the old world that should be rejected as such. Even their first book, The Lords of the Lands, introduces all-female Pegasus Knights in Bretonia. You know, the patriarchal society where the only position of power a woman can hold is that of Lady of the Lake, or Lady of the Lady, more correctly, a prophetess was the term for them. Anyways, obviously, the lore is the primary important part. By far, we all know this to be true. Nobody has any illusion about this other than those who are being actively disingenuous and pretending as if they have any knowledge about this whatsoever. And this is where the inevitable decline also comes in. Let us say for a second here that we don't actually give a crap about any of this, right? The charts are, they aren't the customers, they don't care. They are definitely not a barometer for success or anything. You know, we could look at other franchises like, Star Wars, for example. The most inclusive and diverse Star Wars show ever, The Acolyte, was roundly hated by everything. In fact, it was the thing that finally tipped even Kathleen Kennedy, the untoppable queen, of her lofty position. Or the recently released Starfleet Academy. Every time I mention this, I literally have an example from a month ago of a beloved title taking an absolute nosedive due to a focus on diversity, equity, and political reasons. Just like this. But okay. Let's address the issue then. Okay, the charts, irrelevant. They're definitely not what makes or breaks a franchise, despite all evidence to the contrary. It's the progressives that are the real money pig customer base here, and they were totally the ones who made 40k popular during, the 90s and the early 2000s. a decade or so before they came to power. Totally. We'll just swallow that hook, line, and sinker. If this is the case, then we have one final little question. What will happen to the franchise when you no longer care about the lore? When you do indeed just produce plastic crack? Well, with the female Custodes, we got yet another quite lovely visual demonstration of that, as the people who made the brand new plastic Custodes miniatures forgot to add the trigger mechanism on the custodian blades. This is what happens every time. And we're not even going to get into the theoretical stuff, because I've talked about on several occasions previously. Any sci-fi universe, any universe at all, needs to be treated as a rhetorical argument. It needs to maintain as much internal consistency as conceivably possible, because if you begin to fail that internal consistency, if you begin to deviate from it, you no longer have a coherent argument. You have bits and pieces that are not persuasive to anyone. That is what happened to Star Wars. That is what took a generation-defining sci-fi franchise and turned it into 19% on the Rotten Tomato meter. Same that happened to Star Trek, same that has happened to every single franchise that has gone down this path. And indeed, there will absolutely be a period of continued growth at Games Workshop. I've mentioned this again multiple times too. This is the Games Workshop growth era. It is the franchise that would define a generation, that is defining a generation right now. It has only but barely begun its decline. We are in the initial years of Games Workshop's death, and that of Warhammer Fantasy as well. It will take another 10-20 years before it collapses. But we know the path forward now. We have seen it again and again and again. It's already happened. We are now simply just watching the trains head towards one another inexorably, with no brakes and with no intent whatsoever to slow down at all, until the company suffers the exact same fate. I mean, hell, it has already literally created its own competition. Trench Crusade's primary reason for its successful Kickstarter was precisely due to fatigue from Warhammer 40,000, as they launched that in the perfect window after the reveal of the female Custodes. Now, that franchise is busy shooting itself in the foot with both battles and reloading to have another go, but it's only a question of time until something better comes along. And the faster Games Workshop decides to speedrun their dive into inevitable and eventual irrelevancy, the better, in many eyes. So, no. Plastic crack is irrelevant. Plastic crack only sells because of this. This is the only reason why models are moving off shelves. It is the only reason they have ever moved off shelves. It will be the only reason they will ever move off shelves, as demonstrated within the franchise itself. If there is no universe, you don't need the models. You don't. They're utterly irrelevant. You could play with twigs if you so choose, and indeed, people have. Even the rules are largely irrelevant, as they change more often than the lore do. I could go over there and pull out a 4th edition codex right now and be far happier than I don't even know which edition we're on now. So, this is coping and seething at best, or simple ignorance at worst. It is the thought path of someone who has spent the barest instance considering the real nature of the thing they profess to enjoy. I don't care how much plastic these people have bought. I don't care how many miniatures they have painted. I don't care how good they are at painting, or even how many Black Library books they have read. If you are unable to identify the reason why Warhammer 40,000 is successful, you are a tourist. Until next time, I've been Arch. Thank you very much for watching, and I do hope to see you all again soon. Have a good day.